Good morning. We love that feedback. I'm H.T. Vaught, and I'm the executive responsible for IBM's consulting operations in California. And on behalf of IBM, I'd like to provide a warm welcome to each of you on this session on innovation. And how many of you have used a ride-sharing service such as Uber or Lyft? Okay, great. So you know the experience of being amazed and being delighted. And that's what this session is about, how to equip you to amaze and delight your customer. And so with short introductions, I'll turn it over to Karel Vrendenburg, who's the executive in IBM Design. Great, Karel.
Thanks so much, HT, and welcome to all of you. Yes. We're real excited to take you through a very quick journey. So this is going to be really fast. You got to really pay attention. We're going to give you an overview of the approach that we're now using at IBM, and also what we do with our clients. And then my colleague Andrew is actually going to give you some examples of how we've applied this to the public sector. Let me start off that about 4 years ago, we had a look at what was going on in the world. There were three major shifts happening that were dramatically affecting how many organizations work, and the IBM organization did as well. First is the technology landscape dramatically changing, and you've seen all these things, right? The move to cloud, big data analytics, mobile, social. You can't do that stuff without really effectively knowing what it is that you're designing and who you're designing that for. The human landscape is also changing. This demographic that is often called the millennial, people that were born between 1980 to 1995, while people all think that they're exactly the same, they're not. They're different among themselves. But as a group, that demographic is significantly different and has a higher expectation for design and what they do every day. And they represent about 50% currently of populations that many of us serve. And by 2025, 75% of the population will be in that demographic. Thirdly is the whole shift in terms of digital. And I love this quote, and this is relevant to digital as well as any number of other areas, and keep this in mind for your own organization as well. The last best experience that anyone has anywhere becomes the minimum expectation for the experience they want everywhere. That's for anything that you experience, right? Keep that one in mind. So that led to IBM figuring we needed to dramatically change. Been around for some 105 years, huge company, but we needed to change on a dime, and we needed to have a new way of doing that. So what we did actually was come up with this very simple formula. We needed to focus on the people, places, and practices, and that would yield the kind of outcomes that we needed now for this new three-pronged change in the world. So from a people point of view, we realized that we needed to hire a whole lot of designers because that was the job classification, for example, that we didn't have as many people doing that as we needed to. You generally should have about one designer to about 8 or so engineers in any project to make it really, really work well. We were doing it about 1 to 72 at the time. So we've hired some about 1,000 designers thus far into IBM, and we're still hiring more. We also realized that we needed to change the whole culture of the company. We needed to change it from an engineering-focused culture to a user-focused culture, a design-focused culture, so that we were serving the needs of who it is that we were trying to serve, rather than simply building systems and the like that purchasers might actually want. We also determined that we needed to change the environments that we actually have people working in. So we've typically in the past had cubicles as a typical way of people working. And we now create these studios, that we have 30 of these around the world now, that are ways of innovating and creating and collaborating together with all the key disciplines that we have. What's the basis of all of it is our change in what we call our practices. And there's a bunch of them, but I only want to talk about one because it's the one that we're going to be practicing a little later in the session as well. It is our version of design thinking, which we call IBM design thinking, which has a set of principles, basically 3, a focus on user outcomes. That is the North Star of everything that we do, or citizen outcomes in your case. To use diverse, empowered teams And as the ambassador just talked about in the keynote this morning, if you want creativity and you want a really good solution to a problem, you got to bring a whole bunch of different perspectives together, and that really drives the need for having diverse and empowered teams. A real focus on relentless reinvention. We'll talk some more about that, which is our loop. I'll give you an example of this in a minute. We want you to observe, then reflect, and then make, and do that on a regular basis. And then lastly, we have these keys, and these are real differentiators from the way that you do this kind of work in large companies. We have this notion around hills. We get every project to come up with 3, what we call hills. Who is going to be able to do what with what wow experience? Okay, so who is going to be able to do what with what wow experience? And only have 3 of those for any one project. Yes, there's requirements underneath all of those, but fundamentally, if your project can deliver those and deliver those quickly, now you're actually serving the needs of the people that you're actually trying to serve. So how does this actually work? So I put together the first design team for a technology that you may have heard of that IBM works on called Watson. And we decided that we wanted to make Watson for healthcare and for oncology initially. I said, okay, where do we start? Well, one team started off saying, well, let's just build this, which is typically what people do, especially people that are really heavily into Agile without including design. We said, no, what we had to actually do is really deeply understand who it is that we're designing this for first, right? So what we decided to do was first observe, right? Before putting any pen to paper, we had my design team spend some time, typically a week or so at a time, in a oncology clinic. Do ethnographic observation, be anthropologists, watch what goes on. Also have structured interviews with the oncologists that we're going to be designing this for. Critical ingredients to knowing what to build. And then we reflected on what we learned. We did an empathy map. We're going to do one of those in a minute to understand the people that we're designing for in a very simple way of mapping what we've learned. Also, what do they do today, warts and all? What are the problems that they're actually experiencing? Come up with some ideas very quickly, which we're also going to be doing today, to address those particular problems. Prioritize those, put together those hills, who's going to be able to do what with what wow experience, and then actually start to do storyboards and prototypes and the like as we move forward. So then we go very quickly to making something, and often making is a low fidelity prototype, which is like paper and pencil. In this case, a little higher fidelity prototype of what we think, based on what we learned, would satisfy the needs of the user. And then we go back and observe. So now we get feedback on the designs that we have come up with. In this case, interestingly enough, we determined that the feedback that we thought we were going to get was, we thought that oncologists would love to have this Watson oncology advisor right next to them with the patient, maybe even a big screen in front of the patient, right? No, they didn't want that at all. They wanted to have this thing as a private advisor to them, right? Fundamental insight to know how to design this thing, right? We also got feedback from oncologists that said, in order to trust this, I need to know what the sources are that you're relying on, rather than just saying it's 95% accurate. And so we realized that we're making the design too efficient. So we actually had to include a panel that you could swipe across that would show, oh, by the way, Watson is recommending this treatment protocol, but based on this JAMA article or whatever, right? So you could actually base, but again, that's feedback that's critical to very early on designing the right solution. So then we go back and update, and this is what our walls typically look like. There's a digital way of doing this as well, but we prefer to do it in person. And then we go off and now start to build it, and now have a team that builds that. And everything that I've described thus far out into this prototype, now we're going into Agile proper. All that stuff happened before, and actually planning what you're going to be doing in an Agile project. We do playback 0, which is basically sprint 0 in Agile terminology. And then we determine, okay, to satisfy that first hill of who's going to be able to do what with what wow outcome, it might take 2 sprints to develop that hill, in which case you do those sprints the way you normally do with Agile, but you're now going to do a delivery playback, a walkthrough of what that experience now looks like, and getting feedback on that the next sprint, the next hill might require 4, etc. That's how it links to Agile. We now use this to create our products across the board. We also now use this to power our engagements and the ways in which we do work with clients. We also use it internally to basically do everything that we do internally, and we use it for all of our conversations with clients as well. And with that, I want to turn it over to Andrew to give you a very quick overview of where we're at with regard to examples from public sector.
Thanks, Karel.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Fairbanks, and I lead our public sector consulting practice, which is all the work we do for our federal clients and our state and local clients. And design thinking has really become the foundation of what we do. Before I start, about 10 years ago, I went to a presentation that really had a very profound impact on me that I think is relevant today. And so I'm going to start this presentation with the way that person started theirs. How many of you have ever heard of the golden rule? Just do unto others as you would have done unto you. How many of you think that's a pretty good rule to live by? Okay. You're all wrong, okay? And that was, we were actually taking a personality test, and I usually am skeptical of those. But this guy had us go through this exercise, and he said there's 9 personality types. Everyone has a major and a minor, so there's 81 personality types out there. And I said, okay, that's well and good. And then I got the results of my personality test, which was both how you are at your best, but also how you are in shadow at your worst, kind of what bad traits come out. And particularly on the shadow side, it really scared me how accurate it was. I mean, he nailed me in ways that I thought I was pretty good at hiding. So it got my attention. But what he said was the golden rule is wrong because it ends up leading you to view the world through your own eyes. But in reality, there's a lot of different kinds of people out there. And so what he suggested we do is replace that concept of the golden rule with something he called the platinum rule, right? Which is even more valuable than the golden rule, which is do unto others as they would have done unto them, which to me is a very profound insight, not only in the work we do, but in life, right? What it requires you to do is to take the time to really understand what makes people tick. So at the time, I'm a big picture guy. I can suffer some errors in the details as long as the big picture is right. My client at the time was a type 1, which is the details are the most important. And she didn't care if the big picture was right. She wouldn't be able to get through to that point if she didn't understand the details. That was a really important realization for me to have in terms of how I interacted with her. And we went on to have an incredibly productive working relationship. But I think it was rooted in, first and foremost, understanding what she needed and to be able to tailor how I worked with her to that need. And to me, design thinking is a very similar concept, right? We need to put ourselves in the shoes of the people we serve to understand what it is they are expecting from the encounter so that we can wow them or meet their expectations. So as I was thinking about this presentation today, it struck me as relevant. With the pace of advancement in technology over the past several years, when you think about what's happened with mobile, social, IoT, now with virtual reality, cognitive computing, machine learning, it's amazing how rapidly the art of the possible is changing, right? And as Karel was saying earlier, and I saw some heads nodding, the expectation of the citizens we serve or the state employees we serve in terms of our functions rises with that, right? And it creates a whole new set of opportunities for how we end up delivering services. In 2015, in our public sector, we started living by the principles of design thinking. And we started a process which we called Imagine a World in Which, ... where we really combined those people who had really deep technical knowledge in those areas that I mentioned earlier, with subject matter experts and business analysts who really understood certain agencies and clients. And we married them up through a design thinking facilitated session to create a set of journey maps, personas, and hills that really define the art of the possible for, and we started this in our federal sector, for 1, 3, 5 years down the road. And it was really designed to be provocative, to help our clients understand and think through how this could change the way in which processes are executed. The mistake we made at first was we did this just internally within IBM. So we took the people we had who had sort of worked in these spaces, and we came up with a certain point of view, and then went out to the agencies and sort of shared what we thought were brilliant insights at the time. But what we realized in that was we had missed a really important ingredient, which was the inclusion of the clients and the stakeholders in that process. And so what we've adjusted, or the way we've adjusted FIRE over the past 6 to 9 months, is we've actually begun to co-create and create some of these journey maps with our clients, where we sit down with government people, in some cases citizens and stakeholders, and then people from within our community, to really think through some of the most pressing problems that they're facing. Issues like veteran homelessness, issues like veteran suicide, really challenging problems that really face us as a country, to really try to see, are there ways in which we can use some of these emerging technologies or process changes to really make an impact on some of the most pressing problems facing our world. We've begun to do this in the area around child welfare. We've started to do this around how taxes are collected, around how licenses are processed. And it's really been an exciting exercise, really trying to imagine the art of the possible. We've created a series of campaigns around these, around sort of two of the most important functions of government, the protection, which is Department of Defense, law enforcement, those kinds of functions, and serve, the provision of benefits and the various functions that go along with that. And we've been able to create a number of design thinking generated ideas for how we can fundamentally improve either the efficiency of service delivered or the quality of service delivered. One of my favorite examples is work we've been doing with TSA, where we manage their suite of applications around how to improve the screening process, the dreaded screening process. How many of you hate standing in TSA lines and think they're way too long and painful? One of the things I think is also important to note about design thinking is that some people, I think, mistakenly think it's just about how you design an application. The way we really think about it is how do you design the overall experience, right? Uber isn't really about the interface you have on your mobile device. It's about how you transform the process of getting a ride and paying for that ride and getting where you want to get. Airbnb is not really about the interface that you deal with on the computer. It's about how you transform the way in which you find a place to stay when you're traveling to a new place. And so similarly, we think about design thinking, not just about what kinds of technology tools we might be able to create for something like TSA, but how you can use that to fundamentally transform the process. So we developed the pre-check process for TSA, for example. Part of that came out of some of this work we did. Right now, we're working with them on the use of cognitive computing and image analytics to actually be able to detect weapons and bombs in screening. It's actually scary how many, when they do tests, how many devices get through undetected, whether it's because of human error or negligence or whatever the case might be. There are actually tools that we have that we've developed using machine learning and automated pattern recognition of visual images that can actually flag the actual contraband in baggage at a rate higher than screeners can do. Right? So when you begin to think about how you can use technology not only to streamline a process, but also to improve it, there's a lot of really exciting opportunities. So with this particular example, we created sort of this journey map, this vision of how the airline screening process could be improved. We developed a set of personas, and as Karel mentioned earlier, we're going to kind of get you into an exercise now where we begin to create some of these personas and associated empathy maps for key stakeholders in the process. And we use that to develop a set of ideas for how that process can be transformed, that can then become the roadmap for innovation. We ended up creating what we call the nest, which is our mode for operationalizing this within our organization. Right? It's as we work to try to come up with the next range of innovations with our clients. We really encourage people throughout our organization to lay some eggs, which is really to just sort of create some ideas, some innovative ideas for us to discuss and talk about. We then go through a prioritization exercise and we fertilize some of those eggs that we think are particularly promising. And we have a process of incubating those ideas and creating rapid prototypes using design thinking to actually bring that idea to life that we can then prototype with our clients to make a decision around whether it's something to move out on at scale. And then ultimately we hatch these ideas. I only put this out there just sort of as an example of how we as an organization do it, not to suggest this is right for every organization. But as you think about your various agency missions, and as you think about trying to create a culture of innovation and harvesting interesting ideas and thinking about the art of the possible, I encourage you to think about sort of a model like this that really encourages people to bring those ideas up, that has a design thinking foundation for actually prototyping those and helping make them real, and then figuring out how you can bring them into your agency.